you. Great stuff. I just want to put my view to gallery mode. Oh, there we go. Okay. So good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are in the world. Good day. My name is Sanjay Bana. Welcome to Evolutionary Conversations. Welcome to conversation number 5. Before we begin, I'd just like to also introduce my co-host, Irma, all the way from Lithuania. Irma, would you like to say hello?
Hello, everybody.
Great stuff. Welcome to Evolutionary Conversations 5. Our conversations are literally focused on moving us collectively forward. Let me share my screen with you in a second. Great stuff. Let me know if you can see the screen. Great stuff. So Evolutionary Conversations are literally conversations hosted by Irma and I, where the focus is literally conversations to move us collectively forward. You know, there's that statement that the more you know, the less you actually realize you do know. And our goal literally is to shift people and organizations into new or alternate ways of thinking, of being, and of doing. Yeah. And literally, we do this by creating spaces for thought leadership and ideas to collide for the betterment of all. Our conversations are open-ended. There's no objective. Wherever the conversation flows, it flows. And that's literally the goal behind it, is to have a provocative question and to build out from there. So I hope that gives you guys, everybody, a little bit of a background in terms of conversations. This event is sponsored by CloudSolve, who's our partner for online communications, and thank you to CloudSolve for this, for the Zoom room and the facilities. So let's get straight into the conversation today. Our conversation today literally is our panelists, Jackie Kennedy and Ugnius Savickas. I'm going to begin by just introducing Jackie to you. By word of introduction, I hope you don't mind if I read it. Jackie is the founder and CEO of Lead Me Academy. It's an online leadership development and coaching platform. As a qualified neuro leadership coach and an organizational development consultant, Jackie has spent over 1,000 hours coaching leaders, managers, and entrepreneurs. I mean, that's quite an achievement, right? And quite a track record, right? She holds multiple qualifications in coaching, organizational psychology, mindfulness, and applied neuroscience. She's passionate about building strong and impactful leaders at all levels in an organization. She's a soft skills advocate, education, and entrepreneur enthusiast with a passion for all things people. And I think you're going to get a sense of that as we go into the conversation. And she's dedicated her entire career and education to supporting others unleashing their potential. Lead Me Academy is a culmination of her work to date and seeks to provide every individual with an opportunity to level up and take the lead in their life and at work. So, Jackie, if you'd just like to say hello to everybody.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for the introduction, Sanjay. Very excited to be here and looking forward to the conversation. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you, Jackie. I'm now going to hand over to Irma, who's going to introduce our second panelist. Irma, over to you.
Well, it's an honor to introduce our second guest, Ugnius Savickas, who is business consultant in strategy, innovation, and change. 3 very important keywords here: executive team educator, learning designer, and facilitator for future fit companies. Founder and co-founder of different businesses, from pure business to initiatives which make huge social impacts. I know that Ugnius is consulting around 15 years. Ugnius, am I correct here with the numbers? And working with huge corporations, but at the same time with startups. And thus, I know a lot of pro bono work with NGOs. Hello, Ugnius.
Hi, it's really my pleasure, and I'm honored to be here and really to dive into the topic, to share and exchange. Thank you for inviting me. And yes, when I listen to you, those years sound really horrible. I mean, I don't feel yet that old, but it is true. Yes. Thank you, Irma, very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Ugnius. Sanjay?
Great, thank you. And so, colleagues, just to kick off today's conversation, I'm going to start off a little bit of a story. Emma's then going to add another story, and then we're going to go straight into the conversation. So today's focus is literally on provocative challenges faced by leaders. And I'm going to tell you a little bit of my own story. So 2006, I was appointed as the project director for the FIFA World Cup South Africa, for literally landing the event in South Africa. And literally we entered a period in which there were some electricity challenges in the country. Well, it's repeated again, right? But that was 2006. And, you know, newly appointed, you're the project director, you're driving this big project. And, you know, at the end of the day, you've got to deliver for the country. There's a due date and a time. And, you know, everybody thinks that, you know, the biggest challenge is how do you keep the lights on? How do you make sure these things work? But, you know, interestingly for me, my biggest challenge over that period, 2006, 2010, was not the technical challenges. It was not the organizational challenges. It was a provocative challenge in the sense that I was faced with an organization of 40,000 people that literally emotionally were drained. They refused to wear T-shirts with a company logo on the side because of being battered and being at the what shall we call it, the wrong end of everybody's joke, or the butt end of everybody's joke. And it was at that point in time that I enlisted the help of a coach to essentially help me with my thinking and my ability to navigate this emotional, what shall we call it, turmoil. Yeah. It's how do you take 40,000 people who literally feel like their work is of no worth. They've been ridiculed at home, they've been ridiculed at the office. Where if you turn in the media, your company has become the butt end of everybody's joke. How do you take 40,000 people and within 3 years get them to deliver for an event? How do you unite them? How do you excite them? How do you get them to literally bring their passion to the table? And that was potentially my provocative challenge that I faced over that 3-year period. And, you know, literally, like I said, I got the help of a coach, and it was more working on EQ, working with people, helping them through it. And literally that's what landed us. By the time we get closer to the World Cup, I mean, we started with a spark, and by the time we got to the 11th of June, 2010, it felt like literally the organization had imploded or exploded with energy, just huge passion, etc. And I thought I'd share that as a story. We'll go into some of the details as we chat today, but just as an opener to give you a thought around my version of a provocative challenge. I'm over to you.
Thank you, Sanjay. My story is a little bit different. Long time ago, I was responsible for opening a new fitness center. It was a long journey, very difficult one, very interesting one at the same time. It took me around 9 months to do that. And here we come, the last evening, you know, in the morning, the grand opening, the media will be there, the customers are coming. And I'm sitting there at 12 o'clock at night, and I still see that there are so many things not finished. Still, you know, people running around, painting the walls. And me being at the time, well, still very positive, I just thought, okay, I'm failing. We are not opening. It's just not happening. I took this responsibility. I went this long journey, and it's still, you know, 10 hours left, and it's not happening. So I'm sitting there on my chair, and the CEO of the whole corporation coming, and I'm like, okay, now I'm telling him bad news, that I'm failing and we are not opening in the morning because we are late with everything. And probably he will fire me, and that's the end of the story, and we'll be splashing. So he comes up with his huge big smile on her face and says, Irma, if you still have 2 hours in your life left, you can change everything. Now you need to go home, have a rest, sleep well, come in the morning, and you see everything will be done, and we are opening, and everything will be all right. So afterwards, in my professional life and personal life, I had many mentors and coaches on different topics. But this story, I have it always on my mind, in a sense that, you know, this basically moment, this, you know, 1 minute of chat, this huge support, and on the best probably timing, that's something which, you know, keeps you alive basically, and helps you to proceed. So here is the question. After hearing these two very different, but maybe not that different stories, what do you think? Do we need to be navigated when we face huge challenges, or even small everyday problems already require help? And is it easy for executives to overcome oneself and seek for help and admit when even you think that you do fail? Ugnius, Jackie, who would like to start first?
Yeah, Jackie, please.
Well, I think, I mean, sure. So, Emma, I think, I mean, the short answer in my mind would be we can always value a thinking partner, no matter the size of the issue or challenge. I think that everyone can benefit from having a thinking partner, no matter what is going on. But it sounds to me like it was just really interesting hearing both of those stories, and it made me think about something, both stories similar but different, right? At the heart of them, I was thinking while Sanjay was speaking, this element that comes up time and time and time again, and I truly do believe it. And I think in the fast pace of the rate at which the world is changing and this constant degree of uncertainty, and even though this happened to Sanjay in 2006, it was really a story of how culture could have eaten strategy for breakfast. I know we all know that saying and we've heard it 1,000 times, but for me, that it really sounded like that. You know, if you talk about an entire team of individuals, 40,000 people at the end of their wits, you know, they've had enough kind of thing, they're not ready to do that. That's a cultural issue, right? That's an organizational cultural issue. And the story that I'm hearing you say, Irma and Chair, is really about a situation of you feeling overwhelmed and stressed and needing that support as someone to say, we've got this, it's going to be okay. And for me, both stories, while personal and at huge scale, they speak about this idea about needing a thinking partner or needing someone to come in and help think about how do we overcome that challenge and how do we work through this, thinking about what's important at the individual level. So those were some thoughts that came up. I really did wonder, Irma, how did you overcome that when there was so much to get done and the next day it was going to all happen? But I think I'll leave it there and invite Ignis for now to come in and share his thoughts on that opening question.
Also, tremendous stories. In spite of the size and the amount of people involved, they both have one thing in common, I think. And that brings me to my own sort of investigation and philosophical question about, so what is the greatest value that the CEO or the leader or the manager brings in? Why does he or she get paid? And very often, what I recognize, very often managers and CEOs and project managers, they focus on managing things. Time, schedule, resource, you know, whatever, opening, partnerships, suppliers, anything like that. But I made a, I don't know, conclusion, or, you know, for myself, I would say a sentence or a quote. The core goal of a team lead, project lead, company lead, whatever, is to bring your team to its best. It's not you who delivers results. It's the team that delivers results. So your core focus, first of all, is on the team that will deliver results, which is a little bit, how to say, messing up stuff, because you get paid for results delivered. I mean, we have on your, balance sheet or of your payroll or whatever on your invoice, or, be it service provision or something, you would write, this and that result achieved. Gym opened on that date, because measurability is clearer, it's easier. Football championship opened, arenas built, kilometers of roads built. This is measurability. But none of you both guys bringing these stories were really, digging and building these roads and building these, I don't know how to, equipment and painting walls. So you were actually taking care of the, or you should have had taken care of the people that deliver results. And that is one of the challenges I think we all in the management teams, in the management, levels of the companies, we face. Because it's a little bit, it's a little bit tricky to understand that I'm getting paid for results, but my focus has to be on people and the team. And that, that momentum, actually, Irma, when you told that, the CEO came in and said, look, go and have a greatest sleep ever, is coming from that point of view. Bring my team to its best. If you need in that moment this support, I'm bringing you this support. If you need a hand, I bring my hand. If you need a remark, I bring a remark. So that is, I think, mastery of managing. Well, that's another question. Managing and leading, that's again two different stories, maybe. But I think we have too much managing and too little leading in the company or in the organization. So that's my 2 cents into this conversation.
What I'm hearing you say, Ugnius, is really just this idea of how do we achieve through others,
yes,
and how do we get people into the right state in order to be able to do their best work. And I think, I always find that all conversations lead back to emotional intelligence and communication, in that in Irma's story, the leader knew what she needed, and that was the EQ in order to know that she needed to rest, etc., etc. And I think the reality is that at the heart of that is understanding your people in order to understand how you can communicate effectively with them in order to get their buy-in, in order for them to execute. But that is so much more complex. It sounds so simple on the surface, but then when you're working with so many different people, and that knowledge of self as well in that relationship and that understanding, and I truly believe that it starts with self, in order to be able to navigate and work relationships, because that's ultimately what you're doing. You're actually at the top, you are asking the question, you're paid to achieve more through others and not actually you execute on the results. And so it's that idea of how do we understand the environment and the culture and the people that we're working with, and how do we set that, and how do we inspire, how do we motivate, and all of that comes back to self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and then how we communicate, and what that communication does. Does it motivate? Does it inspire? Or does it demotivate? Does it create defensiveness? Does it let people not committed? Almost kind of the inverse of where Sanjay started, where people were feeling demotivated, etc., etc. Sanjay, it looked like you wanted to say something just now, and I jumped in there ahead of you. So let me pass the mic back to you.
No, absolutely, Jackie. And I think just building on to what you and Ugnius just said, I think too often and this has been my own observation, is that, everybody thinks that the issues that leaders face are these big, ginormous, complex issues. And that's why the title of this conversation today is, Provocative Challenges Faced by Leaders, because it's usually not those big things that move the needle. It's those small provocative issues that every leader has to deal with, and they're different for different leaders, that helps move the needle. So a question I'd like to pose to you and to Ugnius is this: what are some of the provocative challenges that you've helped leaders work through? Yeah. Not the massive mind-blowing type of stuff, but those simple things where, I think too often we need to give ourselves permission, or people feel that they need permission to talk about the small things, but versus the big things we can talk about. So I'd like to literally hear about your perspectives around, what are those provocative challenges that you've had or worked with leaders to help them through? Yeah, thank you.
Sure. I think I'll start with just one example. And I think it comes back to something that I was saying a moment ago around this connection between EQ and communication. I have found time and time again in coaching relationships, often the individual starts the journey with saying something like, I'm really struggling to motivate my team, or I'm really struggling with one particular relationship and it's becoming seriously problematic. And generally they're externalizing, or they'll say something like, this person's really difficult to work with, and I can't understand why they're so difficult to work with. And then the conversation actually goes on an entire different journey to unpack that statement. And I think, and what I mean by that is that we're so often we look externally and we point outwards, right? And why that person is, maybe I'm struggling to work with that person, but I haven't looked inwards to say, well, what is it about me that's making it so difficult to work with that individual? And what I found so many times over and over and over again is that it's often not me that's the problem. It's not me, it's you. And what I found is that when we get into the detail of it, the leader or manager or whatever the case is in the scenario, but I found that it's a journey of understanding, starting with self and actually unpacking one's self and their values and behaviors, and understanding how those have shaped their identity and shaped the way that they feel, think, and behave, and vice versa. And I think what's so common is that we start at that layer. If you think of the iceberg model, so many times the conversation starts at the behavioral level. This person's behaving in this way, they're doing this, but they haven't stopped to ask the question, why are they behaving that way? What is underlying that behavior? And not just that, why, when they demonstrate that behavior, does it trigger a response in me? And what is the response that it's triggering in me? And going below the line to identify what is really going on here in this relationship. And I found that some of the most profound work has happened in that space, truly understanding what are some of the individual's driving values and behaviors. And what I found so fascinating is that often we say we know what we value. We've got this list of values. We'll say things like, I value respect and communication and integrity and so on. But and they're all great words, and they're more actually aspirational than lived. And so we've got this amazing exercise that we use with leaders, and we've done it with so many people. And generally, it's what happens when they go through the process is that they realize that what they truly deeply value is actually quite different to what they've been telling everybody they value. And it's this eye-opening moment when they realize, okay, hang on a second, I knew I valued some of this, but I didn't know that I had these specific values to the extent that I do. And it starts to explain why I think in this way, why I show up in this way, why I get triggered in this way, and why I communicate in this way. And I think we miss the link back to communication, which is so important, right? And then it works both directions. And it's that kind of, okay, so now you started doing the deep work around self and unearthing a lot of these beliefs and values and how they shape the way you think, feel, and behave, and vice versa. But now the next step is to try and have that conversation with the individual and to truly try and understand what is driving that behavior. And then it's this idea of empathy. Once we share that conversation, and for the first time I understand where you're actually coming from, what is driving that behavior. It creates empathy and understanding for the other individual. And the difference is it won't reduce the differences in the situation, but just by unearthing it creates an understanding for each other. And then that, in every instance, starts to explain where the conflict's coming from, where the confusion, and then the process from there often is this process of starting to then not only create that empathy and understanding for behavior and communication styles and differences and all of this, but also then the questioning of one's own limiting beliefs and knowing that everything is on a spectrum and realizing that your values are helpful in some instances and limiting in others, and that vice versa for the other individual, and how we need to maybe start challenging some of these mental models and shoulds and shouldn'ts and so on. And so I'm going to stop there, but I gave you that example because it's probably the example in my personal experience and journey of coaching that has come up time and time and time and time again. It starts with a working relationship, but it has to go back there in order to move forward. And there's this very clear connection between self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and communication, and how those three things interlinked.
What I could add to this conversation, I think, what are those, most difficult or most provocative challenges? It's, I think, I look at it from like two level perspective. One level is the biggest challenge for a leader is himself. So it's leading oneself. So there's a list of challenges that you need to overcome to be a really great and inspirational leader for someone else. The other level or the other perspective is, of course, all those external challenges. We can talk hours and hours about what's happening right now in the world, all the autocracies rising, wars rising. That is something really happening, and how leaders are going to face all of that. But going to the first one and thinking about some concrete examples that I had in my practice, I think one of the biggest difficulties, and it's connected with what Jackie, you told recently about self-awareness, leaders are usually, I call them time travelers. They need to live one leg in the future and one leg in the present, because they need to lead. So that's the person who always goes first and says, okay, it's safe out there, let's go. Let me run and check, and then I can lead. So that's why I say future fit organizations. So someone needs to go to the future and say how it looks like, and how we should prepare ourselves for the future. And what happens? Sometimes they get stuck in the future. It's hard to admit the present. So they like that future very much. So it happened many times in the board meetings, in the executive suits, that they love this future so much so that they becomes, illusionary present. So that, switching from, okay, guys, now let's say this is what we imagine we are, but let's go back to the present and let's name how it is right now, right here. And this is where it is, from present to the future, from the future to the present time. This time traveling is, in many cases, I think, quite a challenge, because you need to admit, that, okay, this is as it is. Like Sanjay, you said, 40,000 people are in deep emotional, well, sorry for the word, but I mean, that is the reality. This is the present. You might want to say, okay, it all is gonna look like very bright and nice and flashy mashy in the, in 4 years, but today is today. So I think that, admitting that present moment is very important. And in a way, I think what leaders need to do, leaders need to be able to reinvent themselves again and again and again. So to say, to question, is it still relevant? Am I still, making impact, or am I still doing what's important? So that is reinvention of yourself together with reinvention of your organization or your approach. And sometimes, yes, leaders need, so to say, or leadership models need to die or need to move from one person to the other, which is the third point of view, or the third challenge that I meet in organizations, is to assume and to understand that you don't own it. You don't own it. Until you get this idea right, you are able to really enable people to do a lot more and to remove yourself as a bottleneck. That's, again, the very popular saying, the trap of the owner, the trap of a shareholder, the bottleneck of the CEO. We hear it so many times. So why? What is the problem? It's just because of the, that control level. Because traditional management book would say, what does the manager do? Control, plan, the old stuff. Where is the inspiration? Where is the motivation? Where is empathy? Where is humility? Where is all the rest? So I think those three, being like realistic and time traveler, really being able to die and reinvent, and being really able to let it go, these are three major challenges for leaders. Each of these, I could give an example of companies, of CEOs. I still remember one company. We had a situation, those two companies were merging, two businesses. They were in a situation of minus 3 million in bottom line. So, the result of a company is negative. And the task was to bring it to, positive result. So in a year, CEO brought the company to plus 1 million. So in the industry, they were operating in agricultural industry. That is really, really an achievement, really, really tough thing. But a person himself was brilliant on numbers, on budgets, on planning, on forecasting. So he is the PhD in mathematics. But guess what? He always said to me, Ugnius, I need you in this meeting. I said, what do you want me to do? Nothing, just be there. When you are together, I feel people, get connected and they feel safe, because I might kill someone in there. He clearly understands his disadvantage of being non-empathetic at all. So this is like Jackie and Sanjay said, that the thinking partner. He said, I need you there, because if I would go too far, I know you will stop me. So knowing the disadvantage, or again, being able to reinvent yourself because your leadership model doesn't serve that well, so bring someone in. So again, be leader over yourself, if I'm expressing myself right, to admit, invite, and really then move on. Sorry for taking too much of the time, but that's
it's so great to listen to you. But I would like to do one step back and still understand. And I know that especially this visionary CEOs or business owners, what they do, they miss the moment, right? There are so many cases when, incredibly good professional teams will leave. And then, CIO would come and, ask like, what's happened? I don't understand. Everything is so
Yeah.
perfect. Why are you leaving? Maybe he, you
Two
know,
things.
he was on the way already 12 months ago, and he noticed only now. So how to spot that right time? When is the right time? You know, how not to miss it? I don't think only empathy here can help. Or
If I may, Jackie, now react. Yeah, I've made two discoveries. I was thinking, you know, I raised a question to myself. What are the most important jobs to be done that CEO has to do, or the leader, or the team lead, or the project lead? So, you know, I defined, you know, some jobs to be done. And then I compared it with mostly outsourced jobs that CEOs, team leads, or, you know, other outsourced to someone else. And surprise, surprise, that was an ideal match. Two things, two most important jobs that I think the leader has to do is to communicate, to facilitate internal communication. That's a primary job of the manager. What usually happens in companies? Who does the internal communication? No, either HR department, you please handle the internal communication, or the marketing department, communication manager. Let's employ the communication manager. Someone needs to do it. I'm not talking about, you know, those, you know, making posters or writing emails, but, you know, you are a heart of a body, and internal communication is the blood. I mean, so you have to be in the center of it. How can you how can you delegate? How can you outsource to someone else? So please outsource the function of a heart to someone. What happens to the body? So that was one. The other was, I already mentioned it, bringing your team to its best. How often have someone heard, like, you know, Ugnius, I need a team building. Could you please do it? Yes, I am an external consultant. Yes, I do it. But, you know, I can provoke change. I can inspire. I can do something. But daily, you need to work with your team. No. Let's fix the team. Ugnius, could you please make them more motivated? And that's enough. Once in a year, that's okay. They get boosted, and then we can, you know, like continue. And when they, again, like when they lose motivation, you know, you will come back in and we will do something again. Doesn't work that way. So I think, Irma, what you raise as a question, because working with people is hard, is time consuming, is energy consuming, and I'm not getting paid for that. I'm getting paid for the bottom line. I'm you know, getting back to my previous thought, I'm getting paid for the profit line, for the, you know, ROE, for the interest, for, you know, for sales, for, you know, give me a number. So then I work with these numbers. I push the bottom line. I cut the costs, you know. I don't talk to people. I just go and do something that will, you know, have an impact to my, I don't know, annual, you know, bonuses. That's why they lose this ability to hear, ability and connection, because the focus moved, you know, from what I get paid for. How can you say you will get paid for if your team performs at that and this level? Well, you know, but shareholders want interest, they want dividends, they want profits, they want, you know, something else. They want stadiums on time, you know. Okay, so then this is your core focus. So I think that's, again, one of the challenges. It's ability to connect, you know, people with results, and then to know where shall I focus to change that result, instead of directly diving to cut the costs so that the profit line would be better. Yes, Jackie, please.
Yeah, Ignis, I think you are hitting the nail on the head there, right? We see it all the time. And what I think you're alluding to here is this idea that the leader or of the team or the manager in this instance ends up jumping in to try and solve the bottom line issue, and instead of focusing on back to what we said at the start of this, is trying to work with the team to get them to achieve their best results, starts micromanaging, jumping in, getting involved, and finding ways to fix it, but not helping others to get there. And I think that's the point that you're making. But you made two other really key points, and it alludes to something I said earlier, which was this idea that communication is the lifeblood of an organization, and the ability to communicate effectively is so critical. And this idea that people are wanting to, the soft stuff is the hard stuff. And so often, individuals who are really great at their skill get promoted into leading others, and then they don't necessarily want to do that work, or maybe they don't feel they maybe don't have the skills, or whatever the case is that they feel that they need, which is maybe work around communication and EQ. And in actual fact, that's the hard. They call it soft skills, but it's the hard skills,
Yeah.
right? But I think you really made me think of something there, and it was making me realize, you were saying how important communication is, and that this should be the number one role of the leader, and it should stay with the leader. And it was making me think of a scenario recently that I saw unravel, should I say, within a team. So, and just to give the example was a individual within a team feeling like their priorities were changing constantly, and that the way that those priorities were being communicated was not clear, consistent, and continuous. And I thought the scenario was really interesting, because it's very difficult to be consistent in your communication if the landscape keeps changing. And for me, it was actually a bigger conversation about the rate of change and our ability to manage short and long-term goals and priorities. And it actually comes back to something around the individual. We're thinking about a system within an organization, the individual, the team, and the organization, and the culture, and so on. Obviously, there's so many different variables that were impacting the situation, but it was really evident that the individual was struggling with the idea that they were so obsessed with the goal or the long-term outcome that they couldn't really let go of that, and they couldn't realize that things are changing, and so they need to change the priorities. And that inflexibility and that need for this consistent communication and things to remain the same was a challenge to the individual's flexibility and adaptability, and the leader's ability to communicate clearly enough and regularly enough, but also to realize that it's not going to be possible to be so consistent. And I find old school management theory is all about control and consistency, and in this new world of rate of change, I think we have to start losing some of that a little bit and rethinking it and saying, well, is it always possible to be consistent when the priorities do need to change and they need to shift with the ecosystem around us? So I still say that the communication is so critically important, and it's the lifeblood of an organization. But when we put it in the context of the environment and the rate of change, we have to start thinking about how that communication might look differently, and how do we also evolve our flexibility and adaptability and our mindset around that to evolve with it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hold on. I see there's a question from Chikri. Chikri, welcome. Do you want to ask your question? I'll turn on video. Please go for it and ask it. Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is somebody's responsible for the top line, bottom line, and now you're teaching him to be oriented to people. But who or how does the environment, the planet, get managed? Or how do we stop messing up the earth, the only earth that we have? And really powerful conversations, and I'm really looking forward for you all to help me understand this element as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Chakri. Panel, thoughts? Love to hear your views. Yeah.
Yes, Jackie, shall I start? Okay. You know, there's from the, so to say, from the fundamentals of the organization, we are meant to grow. You know, it's from the, you know, fundamentals of economy, you know, impact, anything, you know. So it's always, you know, we have to always be in the mode of growth. And then, you know, means for growth, values of your organization. I think those are, you know, so to say, installed in your DNA. So at some point, I would say the whole culture of the organization needs to take care of the impact of the environmental, I don't know, outcomes or circumstances, because it's not a single person that must be responsible. I think that in many cases where companies had the, let's say the, I don't know, the officer for environment, the officer for the, I don't know, sustainability, these companies end up with, so he or she is responsible and we do that shitty part here for the bottom line, you know. I mean, it's, even in Lithuania, we had one company, the very, how to say, the very harsh situation with one company polluting the waters, the Curonian lagoon near the Klaipėda city. So that's, again, one person was hardly or heavily managing bottom line. So he decided that it's better to have, you know, some shortcuts and cut-offs and, you know, to just simply, how do you say it, spill out the polluted waters, you know. So I think, you know, even though the bottom line management is also not one man or one woman, you know, show. I mean, it's the whole team that needs to take care. So I think that's what also our topic defines today. What are those, you know, challenging issues or provocative challenges that we face? Is the transformation of cultures and values, the shift of values. Yes, we have a tremendous shift of the environmental consciousness. We have tremendous shift of equality topics. And how to really smoothly transition your company, your team. If you are, you know, a company of 100 years history, you know, startups, you know, they pop up. They are here, they're not here, there's new one, there's, you know, so just like a popcorn, you know, puch, puch, puch. But companies that we have, you know, with a history, transformation, that is what's really very difficult. So I'm not sure, Chakri, if that answers your question, but I think it has to be within DNA, or it has to be as, I don't know.
So I've been trying to look for this answer for the last 3 years. I've gone to entrepreneurial organizations, I've gone to governance think tanks, I've gone to schools, I've gone to healthcare organizations like Budzog. And what I see is the care is not there in the ontology of work. So when you say what is work, there is nothing about caring for environment. And when you do the sense making and the meaning making in the organization, there is no space for love, for service intention.
Mm-hmm.
There is no gratitude for where we come from. So, so I have a mantra now. What I put everybody and everything through is, what is the person who's talking? Is he giving me ontological junk, ontological nuisance, and epistemic junk? And then only I talk to them further, because I think most of these people I want to look for is there a somatic experience in their conversation?
Yeah.
So what we have seen is that people who talk from their head, there's no somatic experience.
Absolutely.
You can't expect them to do anything good for anybody else. And the lived experience that both of you were talking about, that's where I'm today. I don't know where it'll take me tomorrow, but yeah, I mean, I think you're right about the responsibility, and it's everybody in the organization. How does that responsibility embodied in the values of the organization? So you're absolutely right. I mean, I think somewhere we have to coach them through that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a great question. Seriously. Yes,
Can
Jack.
I just, Jackie, before you come on, Deirdre has typed a response there. Deirdre, I'd love to hear your voice, and just if you could voice over your response, and then we'll go to Jackie after that.
Sure, Sanjay, and good afternoon, everybody. Let me put my video on. Very nice to meet you. I was just saying that I think it's a responsibility of all stakeholders. I agree with Ugnius, whether it's employees, employees, suppliers, customers, regulators, etc. But ultimately, for an organization, most governance best practice, and I know certainly in South Africa, it's the responsibility of the board to ensure that environmental or climate change issues are considered and that there's responsibility around that. Thank you. I also made another point, Sanjay, and I think sometimes we've got to be very careful, and this certainly isn't my area of expertise, so I'm sure there's people that can speak much broader on it, but I think we've got to be very careful to take the party line and make assumptions that things are environmentally friendly because people are saying so. We need to look beyond the obvious, really educate ourselves on if things are more friendly or that there's unintended consequences of the alternatives as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Deirdre. Over to you, Jackie.
I think Deirdre hit the nail on the head there with, we've got to look a bit deeper to see the unintended consequences. So I think that's a very valid point there. But coming back to Ugnius there, and talking about the values of the organization and the beliefs, it really makes me think of the levels of perspective model. And, that idea of kind of thinking your vision and your values and your behaviors and the mental models that you hold, they impact the systemic structures of the organization, which have an impact on the patterns and events. And I think that I think it's a really good model for thinking about this, and that using that as a lens, because whatever you hold, that vision, the purpose, the values and beliefs, they influence, and the mental models that you have about the world and the environment and so on, it's going to impact all of the decisions that you make. And it comes back to Ugnius's example, which was a great example of how it unfolded and how it trickled down and the events and the patterns in that decision-making process. And I think that that's so key, right? We're not always aware of, sometimes we have a set of values and beliefs, and we're not even clear on how they influence the processes and systems that we put in place and how those generate patterns and events. We actually, a lot of the time, we don't realize the knock-on impact of behavior. And I find this so fascinating because also sometimes we have the best intentions and then we realize, oh, that behavior actually created the opposite behavior that what I'm trying to create. But I think what is really important is the more that we analyze that and think about that, we can see the connections and how they are influencing the system and the process. But having said that, it's also quite a linear model. And I think that we're living in a world of complexity and chaos and so on, and it's becoming less and less linear, and it's just so much more complex. So it's speaking to Deirdre and the stakeholders, and where does the responsibility lie? And in what direction is it all coming in and being impacted from? And I think it's chaotic, complex, and nuanced, right? And I think, but the responsibility is in all directions. And it really makes you think about even a simple transaction, all the stakeholders there and their involvement in making that environmentally conscious decision. And then if you take that and you extrapolate that to a complex business model, whatever the case is, then it becomes, thinking through it at all these different levels. And as Deirdre said, the knock-on impact that you might not even be clear of. So yeah, it just made me think of that model. I don't know if it's somewhat useful there.
I think, Jackie, that's a, I was trying to follow, and I had there's a predominant theme that's emerging, and I just maybe hopefully I'm not too far off the beaten path here, but I'm bringing this back to, you talked earlier on about values, yeah, and I think for me this conversation is coming down to the essence of all of this is not there can be all this complexity in the world, there can be all of these issues in the world. It literally boils down to the essence of it is, so what's the value of the leader? Yeah, what does the leader truly value? And these conversations with there's do you value the outcome? Do you value the people you're going to work with to get to the outcome? Do you value the planet that you're doing this on with the people in order to accomplish that outcome? And for me, I think that's probably one of the most provocative challenges for any leader these days is just sitting back and saying, okay, hold on, what am I solving for? And along this journey of solving for that, what are those smaller little challenges I need to solve along the way to get me there? Because it's not linear. Yeah, it's how am I taking my team along? Am I empowering them? Am I giving them the space to thrive and grow and truly deliver? Yeah. And in the process of this, I'm also showing caring back to the planet. Yeah. I'm doing this, but not in spite of the planet, but to give greater effect. And I mean that sort of conversation. So I hope that's the way I'm hearing this. And I thought, let me just bounce that back to you guys and say, I hopefully I'm not off the beaten path here, but that's the essence of what I'm hearing. Yeah.
Also, may I add, Sanjay, to your, because when I hear values, I love this topic, and I love asking these questions because we come to the, as a society or community or a team, we have our own values, and we come with our inner personal values and join the company, right? So either we do agree with the values the company basically created and have, 150, 10 years. But how me as a person with my own values, I'm one context, right? If there is, 10 people sitting in boardroom, there is 10 contexts sitting there. So how we agree on that? Do we need to agree, or we just, somehow can manage and stay with our own values? Do we need to admit all the values company provide? And what do you think?
I mean, I think this is an interesting conversation, right? I mean, I think it's kind of this personal values and organizational values. You see this all the time, right? When there's a clash of values, then people either feel like they don't belong, or they don't fit in, or they're unhappy for some or other reason. And it's an interesting one, because I don't think you don't want too much if they're identical, right, then you could argue there isn't enough space for diversity of thought, diversity of, inclusion. You could really argue in today's world, the more diverse your team is, and the more inclusive it is, the more you will get exposed. And I'm talking about on all demographics in all directions, right? Because in this world, it's you really need everybody to help you solve for the problems of the future. But having said that, you will see the classic example of when the values are too different, the personal values and the organizational values are too different, then there's a clash, and that's where that conflict comes in. And that's almost coming full circle back to that initial example that I gave you. If we don't have that understanding, or maybe as I'm talking, I'm thinking more about, well, how do we foster tolerance in difference? And how do we have that conversation and continuous conversation around embracing the difference? But I think, if you come back to something that Chakri said, I mean, if if they're fundamentally so different, then how will you be able to, if you value the environment and someone else doesn't value the environment, and they'll cut costs at it, they'll do anything to reach their objective, then you're not going to be able to work in that place. That's just not going to work, right? So I think it's like everything, it's on a spectrum. There needs to be some degree of overlap between the organizational values and the individual values, and then there needs to be that space for difference. And I think most importantly, it really comes back to the idea of the leader being able to create a space for inquiry, tolerance, understanding, diversity of thought, curiosity. How do we embrace that? How do we utilize that? And so forth. But there was something else, but I've forgotten it. So I'm going to pass to Ugnius, and maybe they'll come back to me. Go for it.
It provokes again my thinking about, leadership has to have sort of, I don't know, object and direction. I might be a leader of values. I might be the first one to say, we don't do it this way in this company. I might be then the leader of people, I might be the leader, I don't know, of something else, So in a way, I believe that in some cases, society, customers, consumers are leading changes in organizations. Of course, economically matured, countries or markets, they have already, the culture of, rejection, for example. I don't buy this product because it's manufactured in somewhere, I don't know, somewhere with child slavery. And that's it. That's my protest. But until we are hungry, until we don't have other choice, so then still economy is rolling. But at the end of the day, still we might see, I think that economical growth and maturity of the consumers as well, also of the employers, also the generation shift. Our and our parents' generation were just surviving. What values were these days? Just to have some bread on the table, and that's it. That was to feed the family. And now it's already, different story. Now we talk about, am I buying an extra shirt, or am I doing some extra plastic bottle? Am I, so what do I do with that trash? So that is really, I think that that shift is happening. The only thing is, again, remember that time traveling function of a leader. Are leaders capable to spend few minutes in the future, how the future looks like, and bring that future into my company, into my team, in a form of beliefs, in a form of values, in a form of procedures, in a form of, we don't do this, we do that. Why? Because this is the future, so that's a little bit also of a, I think, things are changing, but yes, we would love, them to be a lot faster, a lot, more impactful, all those means but so that's my, again, pair of thoughts into the same topic.
Ugnius, I think you make such a great point around the external, our customers are challenging our purpose and our values. And if you think about startups having to kind of pivot and reinvent themselves overnight in order to meet the demands. But I have a question, and it's something that I don't know, it can go to anyone really, but, often there's a lot of people will say things like, well, the one consistent should be your values, your values shouldn't change. And I would question, surely your values do change, and they need to change and evolve. And I'd be interested just to hear thoughts on that. Is there a degree of consistency around values? Should you hold certain values forever? Or should they, and I think I'm talking both on the personal and organizational level, because they're so interconnected, and we know that generally the values of a leader influence the organizational values. But do they, as the environment changes or the context changes, should the values shift as well?
It's interesting, and just one of the thoughts that I have, because I sometimes also help organizations to define their cultures and to define their values. Some methodologies, you know, when they say, please choose, you know, like, you know, from the value list, choose something that you think is important. You know what happens? In many cases, it happens that we choose those values, or we choose things that we lack the most. If we don't have health, we choose health as a value. If we don't have wealth, we choose wealth as a value. If we don't have family, we choose family as a value. I mean, we very rarely really consider what's our DNA. Why are we still here? Why have we succeeded until today? What was that we did good or great that we now still operate? We do business, we produce, we sell, etc., etc. So this is where I look for, I think, very, very core, very, very fundamental, will not shift, will not change. If I have a value to not kill other people, I don't think there might be opportunities where it would be necessary, but it's, you know, either self-defense or threat or something, but value itself will not change. The situation will not change my value. If I'm mentally okay, I mean, if I'm psychologically fine. So I think it's something in core. If you are born with the value of, you know, stealing, that's sort of okay. I mean, if you left it unattended, that's okay to take it. Do you really believe prisons change people? I don't know values change that way. So but that's my point of view. That's my sort of, again, maybe food for thought here. But I like, yes, Irma, sorry. I like the comment of Chakri about leaderless world or leaderless organization, which is really triggering a very interesting question. We talk a lot about self-organized teams. We talk about sociocracy, holocracy, about, you know, many things that we no longer need leaders, you are self-leader, etc., etc. So I wonder, does leadership in some cases become, so to say, self-sufficient or self-actualizing, you know, so self-defending, so that I need to stay in this position. So that is, you know, the ego and control factor comes into force. And this is where I come to the most provocative challenge of a leader, to really be able to sort of, you know, die or reinvent. So maybe to disappear when time is needed, you know, to let organization really overgrow you, because you might be the bottleneck, you might be the ceiling, you might be the frame. So, you know, you need to change the frame. Like, again, the frames shift. So that is again very interesting when we, you know, is there an addiction to leadership? You know, I very often raise questions to myself. What is happening with people when they get into governmental positions? What attracts people to get there and stay there? And it's, again, you know, it's, you know, is it the power? Is it the control? Is it the megalodonic, you know, projects? Like Sanjay said, like 40,000 peanuts. I can manage 40 million projects, you know, something like that, maybe, I don't know, but there's something with this part. And then imagine you have such a huge control, you have such a huge power. And like Sanjay told, come into a meeting somewhere in the village or in the small city, dressed modestly, be present, be with people when you have everything around you, when you have I don't know, when you have the police under your control, when you have army under your control, when you have so powerful. That is the very provocative challenge, to really be present, be here, be have that humility, have that connection with regular people. I think very few people really take this exam or pass this test. Those tests with money, with power, with with any other stuff like that, and that is very, very, I think, important.
I also would like to add, and I totally agree, Jackie just wrote that values achieved by lived experience. I totally agree with you, Jackie. But at the same time, I'm thinking about this, personal values and corporate values. And I think it's what Ugnius was saying, that we should take care about, fundamental values. And probably they are not changing. And actually, it would be quite scary and risky, if they would. But at the same time, I think that, for example, a parallel or example could be a strategy. We don't, as companies, organizations, we don't write strategies for 5 years anymore, right? It's really dynamic. Everything is changing. We can think about, 12 months ahead and still with, to revise it every quarter or so. So I think at some point, it's not that, well, it's not that strategy really follows the values, but sometimes values really have to some kind of adapt there in a good, in a positive sense there. Thank you. And I really, Chakri, I really liked this provocative statement about leaderless situation. And I think the best check for leaders are, to go on vacation for 2 months, come back from the vacation, and you see that nothing happened, nothing changed. Everything is working. So I think that's the best achievement of a good leader.
I think, just to add a note there on this leaderless concept, we truly back this idea that leadership isn't about title or tenure. It's actually just about a set of behaviors that make you really great at relating to others and working with others and taking the lead in your life. And so we look at it differently through that lens. And I think we know that the world of work is changing and that structures are becoming flatter and flatter, and this ability for individuals are being asked to stand up and take the lead, even though that they don't have the tenure or title as we used to frame it, but they need the skills, and then those skills are coming full circle back to this idea that these are people related skills. This is how we achieve more through others, and that's at the heart of what we how we view it, is that leadership is not about title or tenure. It's about a way of being. But I had to there was one thought that came up for me when we were having this discussion about values and whether or not your values can change and whether some of them are consistent over time and so on. I wonder, if your values can't change, then does that not mean that you can't change?
Jackie, that in itself is a provocative question, right? I love that. So, guys, we've got about 5 minutes remaining for our call tonight. What I'd like to do, Jackie, and I think it's a brilliant question to potentially end on, if I maybe leave it there, right? I think it's a the nice thing about these conversations is we don't know where we're going to end up, right? And sometimes the end in itself is a brilliant question, like the one you've just posed. Yeah. And I think I'd like to leave that with everybody in terms of a question that we all sit and reflect on. Yeah. If your values don't change, does that mean we don't change? Yeah. and is values change and values evolution part and parcel of the individual's evolution, which is very, very interesting. Yeah. So before I close, I'd like to I see there's a number of comments there in the chat. Colleagues, I'm gonna leave you to have a conversation around the chat. We've got about 4 minutes remaining. What I'd like to do, just to conclude, is I'd like to just maybe ask Irma to maybe express 1 or 2 closing comments, and then I'm going to go over to yourself, Jackie, and then to Ugnius, and then I'll wrap up. Yeah, if everybody's okay with that. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So Irma, over to you. And then...
Yeah, Sanjay, I would do what I always like to do. First of all, to thank Ugnius and Jackie for joining. It was an incredible conversation, and usually when we sit with Sanjay before the conversations and we think about the topic, we had this topic and we have these subtitles, and we know how it's gonna be. And it's always the same. It leads somewhere, and that's what I love about evolutionary conversations, that we really, freely talk on topics we care, actually. And thank you everybody who joined today. Edita, Varsha, Nandi, Pravin, Tidri, and Chakri. Thank you so much. And Sanjay, please don't do big, huge wrap-ups. I think it's very interesting to stay with Jackie's question.
As for me, thank you for the conversation and for the field and room to raise these questions and to really chat and exchange. I think I'm leaving with the main takeaway from this conversation, that the most provocative challenge for the leader is himself or herself. And it's that what Jackie just mentioned, doesn't that mean we change, so that there is such a spectrum of behaviors within one value, so that you can really change tremendously within a given framework of values. I mean, you don't need to betray or change your values to become different and to act differently. And then, if to go further on, who is that we? When we talk about the change, so who is that to change? Then that's another topic for another conversation. When we think about change, so who's that object for the change? Thanks a lot. That was really pleasure to be here with you.
Likewise. Thank you, everyone. What an honor to be here. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. I feel like I've got 1,000 more questions, which is always a sign of a good conversation. I do think there's just one thought that's going through my mind, and that idea, I agree with Ugnius about self being the most provocative point of continuation, but it really makes me think about the idea of it's one thing to be self-aware and it's another thing to change your behavior. And I think that also connects back into that final point in discussion. Anyway, I could be starting a whole can of worms. I'm actually going to just stop right there and just say, lovely. Thank you everyone for the questions and the opportunity to be here. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Wishing you all the best.
So the great thing for me is that I don't have to now summarize or close at all, because between Ugnius and Jackie, I think they've done it for me. So thank you so much to our 2 panelists. Truly, truly, truly grateful for your wisdom, your experience, and for sharing with us. I mean, the goal behind what we do is to shift the ways for people and organizations in terms of their thinking, their being, and their doing. And I think it's been really, really, super valuable from that perspective. Thank you so much. I just want to end with a small little something for everybody to say, thank you for today. We look forward to further conversations with you all. If you need to connect with us, my and Irma's contact details are on the screen in front of you. There will also be a video posted of today in our Evolutionary Conversations YouTube site. If you want to access the YouTube site, it's literally on the screen, the bit.ly link. I'll post it as well in the chat. So if you want to, for those of you guys who want to, you can see this conversation will probably be uploaded by close of business tomorrow. But you can see the previous conversations that we've had, our previous guests, and some of the discussions that we have had. So from Irma and I, and from our panelists, thank you to both our panelists. Thank you to each of you guys in the audience. Thank you for being part and parcel of conversations. This is conversation 5. We're looking forward to further conversations. If you do want to come on board and be one of our panelists, reach out to us as well. We're always also looking for panelists to come on board, because you, our audience, have also got views, you've got perspectives, and we'd love to have you as one of our panelists as well. So from me, thank you. Irma, anything to close? And then we're done for
I
tonight.
think, I don't know, Sanjay, but maybe you would like to make a nice photo of all us
Yes.
smiling. Okay.
Absolutely. If I could do that, colleagues.